Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're here for the 4th Annual State of Education in Metro Atlanta. Let me begin by recognizing my colleagues, Katie Kirkpatrick from the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Doug Hooker from the Atlanta Regional Commission, Frank Fernandez from the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, and Ann Kramer from Cox Curry. I want to thank them for their leadership, their friendship, their support, but most importantly, for their commitment to public education. Why was Learn for Life launched? It was launched to bring together district partners as well as business leaders, civic leaders, and others to learn from each other and to share what's working and to address educational inequity in Atlanta. This collaboration is especially important now. In today's convening, you will hear from district leaders who can share on-the-ground challenges of this uniquely difficult time, but also share bright spots, the progress that we are making and the progress that you can help us make to build a much more equitable Atlanta. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you for your commitment to public education, to the children, to the families, the teachers, the staff, the educational leaders of the Learn for Life participating districts. They all need your help. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed leader, the Executive Director of Learn for Life, Dr. Ken Zeff.
Thank you, Milton. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for your leadership of Learn for Life, and thanks for your leadership of United Way. But really, thanks for all you do for Metro Atlanta to make it a more equitable, prosperous community for us all. As we think about the state of education at Learn for Life, and we think about the state of education in Metro Atlanta, we miss being in a crowded room, shoulder to shoulder at the Metro Chamber like we have for years. Alas, this cycle around, we're doing everything virtual as we've grown accustomed to. But what is the state of education in Metro Atlanta? It is resolved that our best days are ahead of us. And so I'm going to spend a minute looking back at the data from this past year and the past few years before we launch into some of the descriptions that Milton had of our superintendents and some of our bright spots. So as we look at the state of education, we first think about what do we mean by Metro Atlanta? Metro Atlanta is about 600,000 kids spread out through the 5 counties of DeKalb, Gwinnett, Clayton, DeKalb, and Fulton. And you see our students of color population, our low-income population is making this a more dynamic community. It's growing every year. And we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that students who are come to our community are well prepared and have opportunities to succeed. At Learn for Life, our mission is simple. Ensure every child in our region becomes a thriving citizen who achieves success in school, career, and life. And how do we do that? We engage partners like folks as part of this conversation. We look at data, which we're about to in just a moment, and then we amplify bright spots. We find things that are working. It's an asset-based model. We take the proven successes and we figure out how to take them to scale to serve more kids. We look at this Cradle-to-Career Pipeline, everything from kindergarten readiness to post-secondary completion. Each one of those benchmarks along the way is critical to a student's success. Now let's dig into how our students are doing in Metro Atlanta. What is the state of education? Let's start with kindergarten readiness. 35% of our students are able to find a quality rated early learning program with the current supply. So there's 240,000 parents that are looking for an early childhood slot, and only about 85,000 slots are available. Now, this is better. We've seen this through the dedicated work of a variety of partners throughout our community. We see this number ticking up, but we still have a long way to go. As we look at 3rd grade proficiency, again, the numbers are getting better. The numbers between 2015 and 2019, we've seen a 4% growth, which represents thousands of kids that are now able to read on grade level. But these persistent gaps across key subgroups remain. We still see a 40-point gap between our economically disadvantaged and our students of color and our white students. We see a similar story in 8th grade math, about a 4-point difference between where students were 4 years ago. So we do see this positive trajectory. We're excited about that. Yet we still see these persistent gaps, and these gaps are closing at a very glacial pace, not enough to quickly bridge the gap and give those students in 8th grade the opportunities they need to be successful at higher order math as they move through the high school curriculum. Then we look at high school graduation, another success story. the common theme point that students have been making progress through 2019. Again, and we look at it by subgroup, and the subgroups gap is much narrower. We're seeing that students of all subgroups, of race and socioeconomic status, are able to graduate at high rates and higher than we see this growth over the last few years. It's very encouraging. More kids walking the stage gives kids an opportunity to be successful in post-secondary. Our post-secondary numbers are mostly flat. About 3/4 of our kids are attending a post-secondary program right after they finish high school. And again, similar gaps, although not as severe. Again, we need all students to enter into some post-secondary program and be successful to get the jobs of the future. And then we look at completion, again, flat. About 1/3 of kids are completing their post-secondary program within 16 months of starting. So that's the progress that's been made to date. Now, what happens as we return to school? As we hit the COVID wall, how do we get past the wall? And that's going to be the theme of the conversations with our superintendents and some of our bright spots. As folks remember, on March 13th, the governor made the decision to shut down schools across Georgia in response to the pandemic. Along with our partners at Redefined Ed, we did a study to understand what the impact of that closure was, because the state did not issue Georgia milestones. There was no test at the end of the year like there usually is, for lots of good reasons. What we found was that 3 months of lost instruction, almost 3 months of lost instruction, was devastating for a number of kids. Kids that were close to the proficiency line in 3rd grade reading and 8th grade math fell. Between 3 to 4% of kids slipped below that line. More than 20,000 kids who were on track to be proficient because of the COVID slide were lost ground. And so what does that look like graphically? As you can see, the steady theme of slow progress being made across our schools over the past years. And you can see from this blue line, had we stayed the same, we'd be at about 44%. But because of the COVID slide, we lost over a year's worth of progress. Years worth of work that our teachers, our administrators, our principals, our superintendents, our community leaders had made. That progress was wiped out and set back by the COVID slide. So what's the challenge now? We know we need to get kids back in school because we know that they thrive in that environment. We know parents need kids back in school so the economy can move forward. But it's district superintendents and district leaders are managing two fundamental ideas that are in tension with each other. How do we keep kids safe? Because their safety is our top priority. Well, how do we keep kids learning? Because the purpose of schools is to educate our citizens for tomorrow. And there's a variety of questions that we ask ourselves. We look at the variety of challenges that districts are facing. Everything from food service to transportation to what sort of cleaning regimen will we have to keep our schools open, to things like contingency closures. What do we do when we see one case? What do we do when we see two cases? Unfortunately, there is no national strategy or national set of standards about what schools should do. So our superintendents have been left to manage this process with the limited information they have. And they've done the best they can under difficult circumstances, but there are no easy answers to how we keep kids safe. And what makes it even more complicated is how do we balance that with keeping kids learning? So we know that kids learn best in school. And when we take them out of the classroom environment, then we have to manage challenges like digital equity. How do we make sure that all students not only have a computer, but have a pathway to the internet? Because if you're not connected to the internet, it's hard to participate in synchronous learning. What do we do for our special needs students? We have students who we know need the support of a caring adult to help them move through their own individual education journey. And this pandemic and these closures have made that very difficult for the student, for the teacher, and especially for the parent as they try to support students who have those special education challenges. We know our students are facing traumas, both seen and unseen, that have experienced both from food insecurity, the economic fallout, and just general fear of safety. Those weigh on our students as they try to return to the classroom. And ensuring that we get all the instructional time students need is one of our top priorities. Now that we've had an opportunity to look at the high-level data and review some of the challenges our districts are facing as they reopen schools, we're thrilled to have a panel of district leaders discuss their perspectives in detail. It's my pleasure to welcome Frank Fernandez, President and CEO of the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta and Executive Committee of Learn for Life, to facilitate a candid discussion with some of our district leaders about some of the challenges they face as they return to school. With that, Frank?
Thank you, Ken, for sharing the state of the region. That is great data to have. And now I have the pleasure of moderating our panel, which will bring that data to life. So I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our panelists, Dr. Beasley with Clayton County Public Schools and Miss Cheryl Watson-Harris with DeKalb County Public Schools. Ms. Watson-Harris, like me, started her role a few months ago in the middle of a pandemic, so I can relate and commiserate on that, and brings a lot of experience from outside of Atlanta. And Dr. Beasley has been with Clayton County for over 3 years, and before that as well in another role. So he has a lot of great, deep knowledge here in the Atlanta metro area. And so really excited to hear from them and want to go ahead and just dive into our questions. And so the first question I'm going to ask, and I'm asking this both as someone who is part of the executive committee for Learn for Life, but also as a parent who has a high school student who has grappled with these challenges of virtual learning over the last, I guess, 8 months or so, and dive into why is this challenge, this pandemic we're grappling with, unlike others we have experienced?
Well, this challenge is unlike anything else we've ever experienced because we haven't experienced this before. This is a unprecedented situation for us, both in the education field, but nationally as well. I've been in education 26 years as an educator, and we certainly haven't seen any issue that has threatened the lives, the safety, and security of our students and our staff in this way. Additionally, it's been one of the most polarizing issues. We have families that are on different sides of the issue in terms of what they want and what success will look like in this space for them. But, you know, I'm incredibly encouraged by the innovation and creativity and commitment of our educators, specifically here in DeKalb County. You know, I'm hoping that we're going to all get through this. I know we will all get through this together as we continue to figure it out and face the challenges before us.
Great. Dr. Beasley.
Well, thank you, Frank and Ken and Learn for Life. It's good to be here. And of course, always great to see my colleague Cheryl from DeKalb. I'll tell you, I'll ditto what Cheryl has already shared, but I'll use the word disruptive. This has been one of the most disruptive events, not just a short weather storm or ice storm that lasts a day or two, but we're looking at months, potentially up to a year, in which our students have been, if you will, jolted out of their norm, not able to attend school, not necessarily able to socialize. Families have been impacted. Cheryl mentioned how we're so polarized because of the event, and all of that happening in a year in which we've elected a new president. Just very disruptive. And we're at in a season weather-wise that it seems to be surging again. So we're having to make these decisions that honestly, we were not necessarily trained for relative to a pandemic. You know, all of us have been trained to make difficult decisions, but relative to the pandemic, this is a first for us. For many of us, I would say in our lifetimes, there have been other pandemics, but not to this degree. So I would just say very disruptive. And our work has been trying to navigate the disruption, mitigate for it so students can learn and experience what we know they need, that instructional process.
Well, picking up on the disruption, so I think for many of us, I'll just speak as a parent, the spring was a big learning, there was a learning curve for everybody, right? Yeah. For parents, for students, for teachers, for principals and everyone. And now we're into the fall, and I think we've learned a few things. And so maybe if you guys could lift up a few of the things that you believe are working within the context right now.
Well, I'll start. I'll tell you, and I want to always contextualize what's working and that we're making it work, but we don't think it's always the best way. For example, here in Clayton County, we are virtually learning and we're making it work, but we would prefer our students to be face-to-face. And so we're making it work. We have great professional educators and school leaders that are actually doing phenomenal work and again, making it work. But again, we prefer, if at all possible or when possible, to return face-to-face. But right now in Clayton County, we've got students engaged in the learning process virtually. Our students have devices. We're providing Wi-Fi for families. We're providing meals, breakfast and lunch every day. And as a community, we have decided to walk step in step with one another to move our district forward, move our community forward, providing high levels of instruction and resources that are needed in order for families to at least deal with, to some degree, this situation. So we're making that work, Frank, if you will. But our community and our students, they're very clear. As soon as we can get back face-to-face, we would prefer that working, if you will, better than this virtual learning situation. We do have some families that would like to continue with virtual learning, and we'll extend that option within the resources that we have. But most of the families that we have in Clayton County at some point prefer to get back to face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So it's working, but again, within the context.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Ms. Watson-Harris.
Yes, I would agree with so many things that Dr. Beasley said. We too look forward to the day when we can return to the face-to-face experience in brick and mortar. Our data is slightly different right now. The majority of our parents and students feel more comfortable staying in the virtual space, and that's how we began our school year. But in terms of what's really working well, so many things. As I mentioned, just the level of innovation and creativity that if we could describe anything as a silver lining from this experience, just really amazing teaching happening, the way that our teachers have risen to the occasion, continuing to explore innovative ways to provide a very high quality virtual learning experience for our scholars. Like Dr. Beasley said, also just what it's taught us about humanity and what it means to be a member of society and our interconnectedness. So schools, recognizing that, as we always have, that it's not just about the reading, writing, and arithmetic, that it's about ensuring that our neighbors are okay, that our children are okay, and that their families are. So like in Clayton County, we're doing a lot with providing food distribution sites, mental health supports, really partnering with our community-based organizations in deeper and more meaningful ways than we ever had before. And also just the improved communication. We always know that communication is usually a big challenge in any organization, but we've stepped up to ensure that we're using the traditional channels of newsletters and our website, but also, again, working with our faith-based institutions, other community partners that might be closer to families and have greater interactions. So just this idea of making sure that we're communicating everything we know, we're communicating our rationale for our decisions, even when we might be in disagreement. We just recognize the importance of everyone knowing what's happening and, most importantly, why.
Frank, I would just add, Cheryl mentioned the communication, which I think has been one of the highlights, if you will, of this work, and one of the strong areas of this work relative to school systems and Clayton in particular. But I would say that one area that all of us, and I think I speak for Cheryl and all other superintendents, we've been very pleased with the level of family and parent engagement at the classroom level, at the school level, and at the district level and beyond the school system. So we're very pleased with the use of the tools that the school systems are providing, the access. The tools are being used for more families and more parents to get engaged, having those conferences with teachers, interacting, seeing what's happening in the classroom. And so we're very pleased that one area that we know is working very well is the amount of engagement that's occurring in our respective communities. And we don't see that going back in the wrong direction as we get through this pandemic. As a matter of fact, shame on us if we allow it to go back to what it used to be.
Absolutely. Frank, if you don't mind, I would also just add to that the level of communication and partnership amongst superintendents. As a new superintendent here in DeKalb, I certainly have not felt alone. My brother, Dr. Beasley here, and all of the superintendents in Metro Atlanta, we've been collaborating, sharing best practices, even if we make different decisions.
That's right.
As though our decisions are informed and then most contextually appropriate for our districts. But I've been on national calls with Dr. Beasley. So, it's really been an opportunity for superintendents to step up and support one another, recognizing the gravity of the decisions that we're being forced to make in the best interests of our districts.
Yeah. Well, let's pick up on that theme of silver linings, right? And some of these things that you're seeing that are going well. Fast forward 3 years from now or 5 years from now, what are some of the things that you guys have learned that is working that you think will stay with us once hopefully we get past this pandemic?
Well, I'll just start. I think school choice and the innovation using these tools, even though we were I think a pretty robust offering of school choice options here in Clayton County. I know they do in DeKalb. I just think providing families other options relative to engaging with teachers and instruction. I see school systems looking a whole lot differently, not just those traditional environments where everybody's sitting in the classroom, but one in which you have some students in the classroom, others who are on the other side of a screen, but parents and teachers and principals working together to ensure that every child gets what he or she needs. Again, social emotional learning is a big area. And I'm glad to, see that districts understand how we can't teach them if we don't reach them first. And so we're supporting students and families. And I don't see us ever going back to the day where we're not taking a comprehensive community-based approach, where we're actually supporting the whole child and to some degree, the entire family, because we recognize that the child is successful within the context of the family. And so more innovation, more creativity, more options, school choice. And I'll pitch it over to Cheryl. I'm sure she has some great ideas from her experiences.
Yes, well, I'll just build on your great ideas, Dr. Beasley. One silver lining from this horrific situation for all of us has been the push towards innovation and technology. And many of our educators, I think, many have been innovative throughout their entire careers, and others have been afraid to make that shift to using technology, instructional technology. And so the amount of comfort and training that has been put in place to ensure that our teachers can navigate this new space, I'm sure many teachers will not return to their previous practice. They see how much more efficient they can be using technology. Also preparing our students for jobs of the future. That's what really comes to mind for me, that, the jobs of the future are not require a different skill set than what we have provided for our students traditionally. And so this experience has also set us up better to prepare our children for the jobs that will be available to them in the future. As well as just to build a little bit more on what Dr. Beasley was speaking about in terms of school choice. We know that everyone learns differently, and now we have a model and a blueprint for students to have high quality distant learning experiences, for students who may want to also be part of the workforce to support their families and learn at different times. These are all options that we have maybe tinkered with in the past, but now have a real blueprint, if you will, for how to do that successfully. And then just the last thing that comes to mind is, and maybe our students may not like this as much, but I don't think there'll be too much of a sick day anymore. There'll be no excuses if you're, you'll still be able to, do maybe an asynchronous experience when you're feeling better, et cetera. So I think that it really has given us the tools to be more efficient, more innovative, and more inclusive of all learners.
So, yes,
Frank, I should share, if I may, I think one thing that tempers my response would be, we don't want to forget about the role of equity in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to recognize that there are some families that are well-resourced, that can navigate regardless of what happens in our world. And we have some families that are under-resourced. And so as school systems, then we've got to be more intentional and purposeful in ensuring that we don't contribute to the inequities. And so that's the innovation or creativity that will be required on our part as school systems working within our communities to ensure that all students have access to these many options that are available, and that they're all making the necessary progress or the desired progress, academic progress.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pick up on this issue of equity. One of the things that we've been discussing in multiple settings is that this pandemic has really pulled back the veil on this, what I'll call the savage inequity, right, that exists across our region and definitely within the education space. And so I want to, in that vein, what aren't we talking about enough in terms of what you're seeing, what students and families are struggling with?
Mm-hmm. I could start with that. And we're talking about a lot of things. We've already mentioned the mental health supports and how many of our families have been affected financially. We have home insecurities that are increasing amongst our families, and ensuring that schools can serve as hubs. We can't do the work alone, but we can most certainly stay on top of how our students are doing, how their families are doing, and what I like to say, always provide a next step. Be able to say, this is where you can go if you're struggling with X, Y, or Z. And I'm not sure that we're speaking about that enough, how much many of our families have been impacted in terms of home security, food insecurities, et cetera. Also, human resources. I'm not sure when you look at social media and again, how polarizing this conversation is, and everyone has an opinion on what we should be doing. I'm not sure people are speaking enough about the impact or the fear that teachers are experiencing. The teachers are afraid to return to the building what they may be exposed to and bring home to their children or elderly parents, et cetera, and how we support them from a human resources or a human capital perspective. This, again, is a new world for our human resources and our human capital staff, and ensuring that we're being respectful of our teaching force and others, our bus monitors, our bus drivers, our food service workers, the people that actually will be on the front lines once we all return to the brick and mortar space. So I would like to see more conversation, more compassion for our teaching staff and those that will be on the front lines, are on the front lines, to really teach our children, but also to support them during this time.
Yeah, I'll just add, I agree with everything Cheryl has shared. I'm going to be very honest. I think some of the things we're not talking about, the differences that polarize us, where you have some communities saying we want face-to-face and not taking into consideration other communities that are being hit very hard by this pandemic. Why does that divide exist? And what are we going to do to address that divide? We've got communities in which a lot of the parents, they are essential workers. And other communities, quite frankly, need to understand that. And in my opinion, they should be considered and very mindful of that. I think we're not talking a lot about pre-K and early learning access and who has the access even throughout the pandemic. and resources that are needed for families that are under-resourced to ensure that students have continued access to early learning opportunities. We're not discussing potentially the impact that the decreases in kindergarten enrollment will have on our budgets next year, and what we can do as a state, as a community, to mitigate for that, to hold harmless, if you will, the school system, so we don't lose funding next year when we get this inflood of first graders and second graders and others who want services, but our funding potentially has decreased. So I think those are things that we need to be talking about more and strategizing. But I'll just say that it's important that we have the conversations and that we mutually understand each other's positions. And we can't have one community getting what they want at the expense of another community who's suffering. And that is just not going to work. And as educators, we have to be vocal and unfortunately put us in a position, it puts us in a position to be very understandable, but we have to lean towards supporting those families and communities that need these resources and that have different needs. And we just need to have that conversation. And so we can get people to understand that it's not about what I need, it's about what we need as a community, especially those who are most vulnerable and those who are often voiceless.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this talking about tough choices and about moving forward. So I think we have time for one more question. And really, it's about Learn for Life is all about collective action and what we can do together to help regionally in thinking about these issues and these tough kind of trade-offs that you guys were just highlighting that are necessary but hard. So what can the community, what can Learn for Life do to be helpful to you all and your districts?
Mm-hmm. I can go first if you don't mind, Dr. Beasley.
Oh, please.
Yes, I would say big picture, policy-wise, I'll echo what Dr. Beasley said. There's certain metrics, et cetera, that are used to determine funding for school systems that really won't be appropriate in this new setting. Assisting with that, some of the policy things related to school funding to ensure that we have the resources that we need to meet the needs of our students. Also, in terms of policy around internet access, right now, as Dr. Beasley said, and we're doing the same, we're providing devices for internet access for our families. But wouldn't it be great if we had internet access for all, so that this wouldn't be something that we had to actually try to self-fund or garner additional resources, et cetera, for that space. But also on a more practical level, and this speaks to the inequities and just a lack of resources in some of our homes, making sure that we are able to secure resources for at-home instruction. Most specifically, something I'm very interested in right now is having take-home libraries in the homes of our students or available for families that don't have that, because we know the importance of reading for all of our scholars so that they don't lose additional over this COVID-related piece or the loss of learning as a result of the virtual learning space. So those are just some of the things that we're thinking about on a policy level, on a practical level, as well as assisting us with partners that can support our testing efforts. That isn't something that we're equipped to do right now. One of the other things, very quickly, that I didn't share when we were talking about what folks are not talking about, and that's the lack of medical expertise on the school level, and ensuring that we're able to partner more closely with our medical community for testing or when we have students with symptoms. So those are some areas that are gaps for us that we would love to continue to work with the larger community to fill.
I'll just add, Cheryl mentioned quite a few things. I'll just add, we appreciate Learn for Life, continuing with the conversation and leading the conversation about equity. that may need to be approached differently in various communities, but the conversation needs to be had and it needs to continue. And then I will say healthcare. I think healthcare is an important conversation that we need to have, especially when you have so many under-resourced and uninsured or underinsured families. That becomes even more obvious during a health situation or crisis as we're experiencing now. So just leading the conversation, helping to perpetuate the conversation about equities, I think would be most helpful for the K-12 space, and advocating for resources that families need, including healthcare, access to healthcare, resources, as Cheryl mentioned, for virtual learning, or just to have additional resources within the home, virtual learning tools, so students can continue to work on their reading and their math and those other skills that we know are fundamental to their success. I would give Learn for Life some more loftier goals, but I think if we spent time doing those things effectively, we would find ourselves more than enough busier than we'd like to be, just focusing on those few things that Cheryl and I have already mentioned.
Yes, well, equity, policy, the digital divide, public health, I think those are all good, meaty things that can make a big difference in the lives of students in both your counties as well as across the region. So I want to end here on that note and thank you both for giving us your perspective and sharing some of the things that we can do to be more helpful. I think this has been, for me, a very illuminating discussion, especially both as someone in the foundation world, but also as a parent. And so I appreciate you both and all the work you all do, because I know it's really, really hard and you guys are making some tough choices. So thank you both. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over back to Ken.
Thank you, Frank, for your guidance as an executive committee member. And of course, thanks to Cheryl and Morcease for getting up every day and fighting for kids throughout Metro Atlanta. Now we want to dive into a couple of stories of impact. Learn for Life is in the business of scaling what works. And we have two distinct conversations that we're about to have that focus on different ends of the Cradle-to-Career continuum. First, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Grant Rivera from Marietta City Schools and Corey Kane, Director of Strategic Projects at the Atlanta Speech School, to talk a little bit about the Cox Campus, which is an online professional development tool that supports teachers as they work with students to improve their literacy. So let me start with Corey and hear a little bit about Cox Campus and the impact it has on professional development for teachers.
Sure. So Cox Campus is a universally free experience and tool for teachers, instructional leaders, and family-facing professionals that are working with children and families really as early as the last trimester of pregnancy through third grade. And what we try to do on Cox Campus is really synthesize the science of reading, in emphasizing the National Reading Panel's 5 areas of reading, which is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. You know, really starting with the earlier years of laying the oral language foundation and moving into kind of the who, what, when, where, and why of systematic reading instruction. Cox Campus is a video-based tool that not only has professional development through courses on Cox Campus around those areas, but also a very robust resource library and a way for the 131,000 members on Cox Campus to connect in kind of a professional learning community through our community section of Cox Campus. There are so many resources, tools, and ways to kind of connect with experts and implementers in the space of early language and literacy instruction.
So Grant, tell us a little bit about why this online professional development tool and this partnership with the Atlanta Speech School makes sense for Marietta City Schools.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And thank you, Corey, for the work that you're doing and the work that you're leading through the Atlanta Speech School. For us, in Marietta in particular, we wanted to start an early learning center. We did not have one here previously under the school district. And as we went about those initial discussions, we had educators with the right heart. We had educators with the right passion. But quite candidly, we didn't have the science, we didn't have the network, and we didn't have the collaboration. And what Corey talked about these 131,000 educators across this network, for us, it was about taking the very best science and the very best research and giving our teachers access to online courses, online videos, this online network of educators, of passionate professionals who could help us do the right work. And that's really where I've been so grateful. Our Early Learning Center, our district priority around literacy is better and stronger because of the online resources that exist. No longer are our teachers kind of wandering through the hallways and wandering through this thing we call early learning and literacy. We've got a guide and a coach and a professional network that candidly has helped us be stronger and better and faster, so our kids are learning better than they ever have before.
So good things are happening. Teachers are getting better. Corey, what's the long-term vision for this partnership? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback on what Grant said, our partnership is really, the outcome of it is much bigger than what we could have ever expected. You know, they look to us as expert coaches, but it's really been a very reciprocal process for us in this learning journey. I mean, it's certainly a shared journey. There are so many expert implementers at the city of Marietta that has really been informing the way in which we evolve Cox Campus. So what we do know about education is that change is the consistent. So the field of education evolves daily, and we want to make sure that we evolve Cox Campus to meet that growing need. So for us, the long-term partnership really looks like a continual incubation and innovation around practice so that we can really hone the tools, the resources, really the overall experience on Cox Campus for those educators that are where the rubber meets the road, the ones that are in the trenches every day. We want Cox Campus to just be a tool to help them as they kind of fight the battle to eradicate illiteracy in the city of Marietta. I mean, the benefit of the tri-partnership with Learn for Life is just in the city of Marietta is that we are creating things that support the region, but also our state and then our national through the access of Cox Campus. So we're certainly grateful for this partnership and the vision of the desire to have consistent, systematic instruction in Marietta.
And Grant, as we wrap up this brief conversation on Cox Campus and this partnership, how do partnerships like this within Learn for Life, within the larger community, help Marietta City Schools, especially in the era of COVID?
Yeah, so I think as you've heard, right, the Learn for Life, as you talk about these pillars and this opportunity to pull research and best practice together and create a network of leaders around Marietta, the Cox Campus, the Atlanta Speech School, this idea that, again, there's a network, it's research-based, it's science-based. So why do those two things matter so much? My greatest concern in the era of COVID is that our educators, our community, our families are whipped. They are tired. And in so many situations, the uncertainty of COVID, what does tomorrow look like? What does a quarantine look like? What do temperature checks look like? What's virtual? What's in person? All of this uncertainty, as I've talked with our staff numerous times, there's so much uncertainty that exists. We say, I can't promise you clarity. What I can promise you is communication. And to our early learning educators, I can promise you the Cox Campus.
Yeah.
I can't promise you what how that's going to change our classroom, but I can promise you this network of educators, the science and the research will be steady. It will be consistent, and it will be here for you even when everything else in their world is changing. I believe it's the partnerships around the science that Learn for Life provides. It's the partnership around the collaboration and the research that Cox Campus provides. That's where we give teachers hope. We give them consistency, and we give them support in a time when, and I think unlike any other time in education, in the history of education, things are so uncertain, but I can give you stability and I can give you best practice. And I think that gives our educators hope. It gives our families confidence in what we bring to the classroom each and every day. And as a superintendent, as a dad of a 5-year-old, I couldn't be more grateful for what Learn for Life, for what Cox Campus and this entire network brings to the stability that hundreds and thousands of children, but also my own, see in classrooms every day.
Yeah. And Ken, before you wrap, because I know we're wrapping soon, what you just mentioned, Grant, is really important. Those who are funding the Cox campus really gives us the flexibility to be able to meet that growing need. And so I would be remiss if we didn't mention the community in Atlanta that are supporting the development efforts of Cox campus, the Cox Foundation, and tons of other philanthropists that are really supporting us. They have allowed us to pivot in this moment of uncertainty to really be a stabilizing force. And so I, greatly appreciate you, Grant, you highlighting it as a staple force. And it really is because of the backing that we're getting from this community of collaborators, Learn for Life, and the funders. So I just want to make sure I mention that because it is a very important space. They've been so flexible in letting us really pivot to meet the growing need of the community.
Well, I couldn't get all the thousands of students from Marietta City Schools to fit into these little boxes. So let me, on their behalf, say thank you to both of you for what you're doing each and every day and for your time and energy to seeing this work to help grow teachers and ultimately to help grow students throughout Metro Atlanta. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we want to take a minute to go to the other end of the Cradle-to-Career continuum and talk about post-secondary. We have heard from district superintendents so far, we've heard from foundation heads and nonprofit leaders, and now we get a chance to hear from those at the center of our work, our students. Our post-secondary network has been laser focused on identifying strategies that support our students during the difficult transition from high school to college. We are thrilled to have one of our region's bright spots, College of Eisenhower, here to share a little bit about the successes and challenges that they encounter supporting students, which has been even more challenging during the era of COVID. Let me welcome our dear friend, Dr. Yarborough Peoples, Senior Director at College of Eisenhower, to take us into our next panel. Yarborough?
Thanks, Ken. The College of Eisenhower is a national college access nonprofit with the mission of increasing the number of first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students of color who enter and complete college. We execute this mission through two models: a virtual model using video, text, email, and phone, and through our traditional model where we train and then place recent college graduate and high schools full-time to work alongside school counselors to provide support to students throughout the college application and financial aid process. Our advisors are close in age to students and often have very similar backgrounds. The ultimate goal is to create an advisor and advisee relationship that offers students the opportunity to get support from someone who recently went through the college process and who may have navigated a similar life path. In Georgia, we have two universities that partner with College of Eisenhower, the University of Georgia and Georgia State University. Both programs have advisors placed in Metro Atlanta high schools, in Atlanta public schools, in Gwinnett County, and in Henry County. Today, I'm joined by Carmisha Primus and Soraya Pearson. Carmisha is a college advisor and AmeriCorps member with the Georgia State College of Eisenhower program. She serves at Carver Steam High School and Atlanta Public Schools. Soraya is a class of 2020 Carver Steam graduate and a first-year student at the University of Georgia. I'm so happy to have both of you ladies here with me today to ask you a few questions about the advisor and advisee relationship, particularly during this COVID experience. So Carmisha, I want to start with you. How did CAC's work shift last spring when COVID hit?
When COVID hit, one of the shifts included working virtually. My co-advisor and I went from meeting with our students in person to meeting with them on Zoom. So we decided to create a virtual office space that would allow our students to receive help with their post-secondary plans. We will host daily Zoom sessions for about an hour and answer any questions in regards to enrolling into college. And we also hosted various virtual college rep visits. Another shift was communicating with our students by phone, email, social media, the Remind app, and the Family Academy, which is a parent and guardian texting program by Grace SMS system. Using various ways to communicate with our students played a huge role in meeting with our students one-on-one, because we were able to let our students know that they could reach us with more than one way if they needed assistance.
So Carmisha, thinking about that, what was the most challenging part of that shift, and how did you and your co-advisor address it?
The most challenging part was having the correct contact information for our students. My program director informed the advisors to collect all the students' updated contact information. However, some of our students' numbers were incorrect or out of service. So my co-advisor and I decided to address this situation by creating an Instagram page that will be dedicated to contacting our students, as well as promoting different college-related events. After we created our Instagram accounts, we did see an increase with communicating with our students.
That's great. I'm so glad that you all were able to think about how to reach your students, and using social media, I'm sure, is a way that you were able to pull in many more of them, because we know a lot of high school students are on social media. Soraya, I want to bring you into the conversation. How did COVID affect the end of your senior year and your college going plans? And then how did Ms. Primus support you?
Yes, ma'am. So, being hit with COVID in your senior year was, of course, saddening. I wasn't able to, do everything that I anticipated to do. But as far as planning for the next steps, I was still able to do everything pretty effectively. I mean, it wasn't the same as going to Ms. Primus' office and seeing her, on my free time in school or whatever. But I definitely made use with the Instagram page and her phone number by keeping in, contact with her, making sure I was still receiving help with finalizing my financial aid and scholarships and things of that nature.
So have you been able to stay in contact with Ms. Primus since you started college, over the summer, even during that transition period? Have you all been able to stay connected?
Yes, ma'am, we definitely have. Right before I went off to college, I had a little trunk party, a safe social distancing thing, and she was there, of course, to support and lend me some kind words, some final words, some things that, she felt like I needed. And as of now, we still do stay in contact, checking in on each other. She makes sure that, I'm still good with where I'm at and making sure I have all the things that I need and getting ready for next semester and things of that nature.
So Soraya, when you think about the impact that the advisor has had on your life, and maybe compare that to friends who don't have advisors, like, what do you think that the importance of that advisor role has been to you and your success?
Yes. So, I mean, being a senior, you don't know everything. You don't know the ropes of everything. It's new to you, and you're like anticipating graduation as well as whatever is to come next. So having Miss Primus here and her being a recent graduate herself, we were able to have a bit, more of a one-on-one, and she was able to share some helpful things with me about going into college, and just having her there, of course, helping through the scholarship process, financial aid, and everything like that was very helpful. And it was a blessing in itself. I don't know what I would have done without her, honestly.
Well, I'm glad that you two found each other, and we know that the success of that advisor-advisee relationship takes the work of the advisor and the advisee. So I'm so glad that you two were able to be connected and stay connected as you move forward in your future. So I want to thank Carmisha and Soraya again for sharing your experience and the importance of that advisor-advisee relationship, particularly throughout the pandemic. We are excited for Carmisha to continue her work at Carver STEAM with this next set of seniors. And we're also excited for Soraya as she continues to accomplish great things at UGA in her first year. Collaboration to accomplish goals is not only important in this kind of advisor-advisee relationship. I'm personally grateful for the regional collaboration supported and led by Learn for Life. The connections, thought partnership, and sharing of promising practices has been particularly helpful during this time. Learn for Life serves the role of both connector and amplifier of the challenges to post-secondary success in Metro Atlanta, and also helps broadcast the solutions and practices that are aiding in the progress. I'm grateful for my participation in this network, and I look forward to the continued work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Yarborough, for your leadership at College of Eisenhower, and we wish Carmesia and Soraya nothing but continued success in the coming year. As we conclude today, let's talk about what's next for Learn for Life. In the coming year, we will identify bright spots, scale what is working, make relevant data available, and most importantly, play our role in making sure this return to normal works for a whole lot more kids. At Learn for Life, we are overcome with gratitude at the engagement we see in every corner of our community. Thank you to the hundreds of folks who attended a network meeting this past year. If you want to join one of those networks, look in the chat. The links to sign up will be available. And if you just want to follow our work and be on our mailing list, that link will also be available. I want to thank all of our presenters that were part of today's program to show the broad reach of this collective impact work. Thanks to our district leaders, our community leaders for sharing your insight and your challenges today. We are better for it. I want to offer a final thanks to our investors. We could not do this work without you. And if you would ever like to see your logo on this slide, let us know and we'll talk about how you can help accelerate our work. Finally, stay engaged with Learn for Life. You will get a follow-up email shortly after the event. We'd love to get you plugged into this work and figure out ways that you can help contribute to the progress that we're making. We know these are challenging times, but as we prepare to leave 2020 behind, I'm encouraged by the collective energy I see throughout our community. I know our best days are ahead of us, and we look forward to working together to make 2021 a more just and equitable Atlanta for all of our students. Thank you for being with us today.